Been a while since I made a vid, and why is that? Well, mostly because I haven't been shooting much film, and I'm lazy. Who would have thought a person could get a little tired of the process of getting more and more expensive film, shooting it, developing it, scanning it, and then editing it for an end result most people wouldn't even notice. Though I did get to post them to Grainery, the app taking a small town by storm. After approximately 7 years, I realized that film photography and myself don't really jive. For starters, it gives me not one, not two, but 3 chances to screw up what could have been a good photo. And patience and confidence is something I've yet to unlock in my skill tree. In my never-ending quest to light money on fire, I actually have a mildly interesting camera or camera part to talk about in this one. One that's more interesting and frustrating than your standard 35mm or medium format camera. I'm talking about the Bronica ETRsi, but not a 645 format one. The one where you pay for the privilege to shoot this medium format camera but on 35mm, but it's a bit wider. The Bronica ETRW 135 filmback. The solution that may not be a solution for a problem some of us have, which is the XPAN. What is a film photographer to do when something like a Leica MP or a Fuji GF670W is neither rare nor expensive enough to properly dunk on all your fellow photographers with? Well, you buy an XPAN, of course, but more on this later. And to all of you who get your film photos into your computer by taking a picture of your picture with a digital camera, I just hope you feel good pulling down your pants and pissing right in the mouth of Papa Kodak, or whoever's behind film. I'm not a historian. Let's talk a little bit about the camera before the back. The ETRsi was produced from 1988 to 2004. It weighs approximately 3 to 3.5 pounds, the same as 45 rounds of .308, or about 10 Mighty Maxes. While this camera does run off battery and has electronic components, if you don't have a battery it still works, but you're stuck at 1/500th shutter speed. The system is modular and has lenses as fast as f2.8, and with many different viewfinders, backs, and grips. The film advanced gearing mechanism was improved. The lower half of the body has an improved grip area. The lens release was moved to the front of the camera, and there were also dark slide and winder improvements. I've owned the Hasselblad 500cm, the Bronica SQ, and the Mamiya RZ67 Pro 2. While I've never owned any of the Mamiya 645 systems or the Fuji GX680, I can say that though this camera doesn't have the same fit and finish, and no one who doesn't know cameras is going to ask you about it like the Hasselblad, it does, in my opinion, does just as good of a job as other modular medium format brands. The 135W back came out for the system as a solution for taking better dick pics back in the day. The less boxy aspect ratio benefited the photographer's subject in this regard. Speaking of aspect ratio, let's talk about it. First off, this isn't the same aspect ratio as the XPAN. It's slightly shorter, about 16% shorter in fact. The approximate aspect ratio, if you were to compare it to this image of common motion picture aspect ratios, would be 2 to 39 to 1 for the Bronica, while the XPAN is closer to 275 to 1. Other panoramic cameras like the Widelux and Horizon fall between these two. Wider than the 135W, but shorter than the XPAN. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about these two cameras. Pros to getting the 135W is the cost, and the fact that you can use 120 film on the same camera with a different back. The Bronica system has lenses that open as wide as 2.8, where the XPAN is only f4. We also have to talk about the price. The XPAN and Fuji version are currently selling on eBay from $4,000 to $6,000 with one lens. The ETR kits sell from anywhere between $2,000 to $1,300 depending on condition and how many accessories and what kind it comes with. While the 135W back seems to sell for anywhere between $600 and $900 by themselves. You might be asking, where do you buy your gear? I usually buy them in this order: usephoto.pro.com, KEH, and then eBay. I find that while UsePhoto Pro doesn't have nearly as much in stock as KEH, they do seem to have better prices. KEH seems to have everything except the coveted GX617 viewfinder that I've been searching for years. But you will need to use a large dab of lube on your poop chute when selling them your used gear. They almost go full GameStop sometimes. eBay, I almost always try to buy from a seller in Japan, and I make sure the condition is mint with at least 8 pluses following it. If you have gear you're looking to sell that's new, I'd first try selling it on Craigslist and just make sure you meet it at a Starbucks so you don't end up dead in a ditch. I've never tried mpb.com, but maybe that's something. The 135 back is said to work with ETR, ETRs, and ETRsi, but I bought an ETRs body originally and had issues. There's also a different 135W back for the Bronica SQ system as well as the Mamiya 645 systems. So what are my thoughts on this camera after using it? Is it the most okay-ish medium format camera? Yes. The 135W back is, well, niche. It's a really cool format as long as you're shooting with it in mind. I think that's the difference between shooting a camera like this that only shoots in this wide format as opposed to just cropping later. You have to think about framing with this specifically. I think this wide back works best with cinema film like your 50 and 400D and your 500 and 800Ts. The wide format has this motion picture ratio to it, so it lends itself best to using motion picture film, in my opinion. As a pro tip, if you want to add some nice flair, definitely on purpose, not on accident twice in a row or anything, just load the film over the plate so you get some nice vintage scratch styles all across your film. So how is this in terms of an XPAN alternative? Well, it's not really. If you're willing to save 50+% on a slightly more narrow ratio, then it's the camera for you. A good digital alternative would be to use the 24x65 mode on the Fuji GFX system, as it's the same ratio as the XPAN and it's digital. 2 cameras in one basically. You can also be an absolute mouth breather and just buy a $2 3D printed 35mm to medium format adapter and load your film into a medium format camera of your choice and show your hipster friends how cool the image is on the perforation part of the film. Is it fair to call the XPAN overrated? Yes. If it wasn't the only camera that's a rangefinder and shooted 24x65mm. I myself don't want to have to perform silent prayers whenever I go to turn on my camera that costs the same as this awesome human bowling thing. I would like to know how those of you who got your $4,000 to $6,000 to spend on your XPAN, why you chose to spend it on a niche ticking time bomb, but you're probably too busy with your S-Cargo and NFTs. I feel like the average film photographer gets this more to stunt on everyone else until they realize how much of a pain in the butt it is to scan and upload, but enjoy your Flickr accounts because Insta is not a fan of this format on everyone's vertical phones.